At InDigital, we know the public safety professionals hold themselves to a high standard. In fact, standard doesn't do it justice. In over 25 years working alongside you, carrying millions of calls over our IP networks, your dedication has inspired us. That's why our ESI Net goes beyond industry standards, not only I3 compliant, but designed to adapt to future development for a network you can count on when it matters most. Learn more at indigital.net.
If Within the Trenches has ever taught you something, open your eyes to what it is like to be a 911 dispatcher, or has inspired you to become one, then help support us and join our Patreon. Get exclusive bonus content, one-of-a-kind swag, discounts on merchandise, ad-free early access to new episodes, and much more. To join, please visit patreon.com/WTT podcast. And if you're an industry partner, we have something for you as well. And now, for the show.
This is Jordan, and you're listening to the Code 7 Podcast Network.
Warning. This episode contains the 3 A's of podcasting: adult content, adult language, and awesomeness. You've been warned.
Welcome to Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them.
Hey, what's going on? This is Ricardo with the Code 7 Podcast Network, and this is Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them. This episode is sponsored by InDigital, a leader in next-gen core services, and a big shout-out to Facebook subscribers and patrons. As always, thank you so much for everything. There is so much going on. Let's see, it's January 23rd right now, January 23rd, 2023. I am fresh back from the NENA SBP conference. That's Standards and Best Practices. A lot of great sessions that went on during that week. Got to see a lot of people that I had not seen in a while, and met some new folks as well, which is always good. I love meeting new people at different conferences and everything, or different events, whichever it may be. It's always been really good. But also a lot of bonus content that I've been putting out there and throughout all of my social media, and especially for subscribers and patrons. So if you are part of that, you know a lot more of what is going on, and also a surprise guest that is going to be coming up here. Actually, I think we're going to be recording tomorrow. You'll find out soon enough. You'll find out. It'll be good. But I'm excited for everything that is going on. 2023 has been excellent so far, and I'm just so happy to be here with all of you and to continue doing what I love doing. So thank you very much. And I am excited for my guest today. We were supposed to record last week, but it didn't work out. I screwed something up, and we had to reschedule. There's a lot of times, and so here's the thing. I do have a new volunteer assistant producer, and she helps me with a lot of the scheduling and everything, but some of the other scheduling I'm the one that's doing, and I need to have her just do it so that I don't screw it up, because I double booked on a bunch of stuff. And today I'm recording the episodes that I was supposed to record the week prior, but it is going to be excellent. Again, I'm excited to do this, and we're going to be talking today about 911 dispatchers and compassion fatigue. And my guest today is Angela Johnson, and she is a former 911 dispatcher and supervisor, as well as a licensed professional counselor, and was a speaker for DTBG4. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
I am doing well. So glad to be here.
It's good to have you back here. And also, if I may say, for those who are listening on the audio right now, you can't see this. However, if you do get to see it, the background and everything that Angela is working with, like, this is like straight up like magazine style. Like, this is nice. Like, I love the colors and everything. I have to ask right off the bat, because of what you do for a living,
yeah,
the colors that you're using, like, is any of this, does this go along for like moods and everything?
It does. It is intentional. So when the pandemic happened,
Hmm.
we all switched over to telehealth. So on that side is a closet. So I was like, well, I really don't want my clients seeing my closet, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, I wanted to create a space to where they're not looking at the fake background
Hmm.
or they're not looking at plain walls, and it felt comfortable, which was important. So I created this kind of like mini office.
Nice. I love with what you're working with there, and the way you explain that. You make me want to bust out my green screen again, because what I used to do is, and green is my favorite color.
Mhm.
I would have a green screen behind me so that no one would see my work, my other work that I do, and looking at mine compared to yours and thinking about how it makes me feel, it feels chaotic. So I might take a page out of your book, man. Like that's pretty awesome. I like it. Very
Thank
well done. I like it.
you.
But again, I'm happy to have you here. And you were a speaker for Dare to Be Great 4, had an
Yes.
excellent session, and I wanted to have you back so we could dig a little deeper into what it was that you were presenting. And again, this is on compassion fatigue. But before we
Mhm.
get started with that, if you could give an overview of actually, kind of your dispatch experience and how you went from dispatch to what it is that you're doing now. Like, how did you get to that point?
That's crazy.
You're like, uh-oh, do you have more time?
Yeah, I know. I don't believe it myself sometimes that it sort of like this progression that happened. All right. So I was a dispatcher for a total of about 18 years.
Mhm.
With the last agency that I was with them for about 16. And the last 5 years, I was on permanent nights. So the only reason at that time I wanted to become a supervisor was because I didn't want to answer the phone anymore and I didn't want to work the radio. But one of the trade-offs was all of the supervisors went immediately to night shift. And I didn't find out until later that there's no way to come off unless somebody retires or leaves. So the combination of my own experience with compassion fatigue and just going through everything, I knew I couldn't stay.
Mhm.
So then I started this process of slowly transitioning out. So for me, for compassion fatigue, is after a couple of years, I started to notice the difference in myself and my coworkers, like the individuals that started with the academy with me. Just the change is like some people call it jaded. We become aware of what goes on when everybody's sleeping. We have this like dark sense of humor. It all like helps us process what we're experiencing. But it became more than that. So I was working a lot of overtime. We would have this running joke about what day you were on. I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
34. Woo, that's exciting. No, that was not good.
Right. Yeah. It's not like a rite of passage or anything or an achievement.
No, it wasn't. I mean, the overtime money was great, right? But
Right.
you're just so tired that you don't have time to even spend it.
Mhm.
So, and then we have the rotating shifts. We used to rotate all the way around every 28 days. And then, I don't know, we had this director that somebody on day shift complained that night shift wasn't doing anything. So he says, well, I'm going to fix that. I'm going to send each shift to nights for 1 year. And at the time, my child was younger, and I'm like, what am I going to do? I didn't sign up for nights when I came here. But, as a dispatch, you go where they tell you to, right? So
Right.
made it through the year of nights, and then we went back to rotating days and evenings. And it was just call after call. So I'm a crap magnet. Really, I am. If there's going to be something big that happens, I'm either going to get it on the phone call or I'm going to get it on the radio. I don't know why. I get that spirit. But if there's a pursuit or a shooting or something, you can pretty much guarantee that I'm going to be working it somehow. So, and then it just got to be frustrating and I was tired, and I started getting irritable and angry and not sure why. And it's like cable goes out in the radio room, everybody starts picking on each other. I'm like, what is this? We come together as this team when something happens, but when it's slow, everybody starts, just picking on other people. It's like we were in high school.
It's like cabin fever or something. It's just
It
weird.
is. And then there's the physical, there's the difficulty sleeping and the gaining weight, and just the self-care sort of goes out the window, and you don't even know what that is anymore. So then I just started getting exhausted. I was like, I can't do this anymore. And I really wanted to find out what was going on, because I've noticed it in police officers too. So, in dispatch, some of us like either gravitate towards fire and EMS, and some of us towards PD. I went towards PD, that was my side.
Mm-hmm.
So I started talking to, officers that have been there for a while, and they also have that same jaded, dark sense of humor. And they take it home. And that's what really bothered me, was I was taking this home. So I started looking into it, and I was like, there has to be something, because back then we really didn't talk about mental health at all. The mentality was, it's part of the job, suck it up.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yes, some things are part of the job that we can't change, but then there are some things that we shouldn't have to try to deal with by ourselves or think that it's normal. So when I started looking into it, this was about the same time that our department was creating a crisis intervention team.
Mm-hmm.
And I really wanted to be a part of that too. So mental health started coming into the picture slowly during that time. So I found out it was burnout, compassion fatigue, started figuring out what PTSD was, and vicarious trauma. All of these terms. So it's like, okay, this sounds, from what I'm reading, is to be about compassion fatigue. We're hearing everybody's story, trauma, every day, every phone call. And what do we do with it? We absorb it. And we just kind of let it sit there. So I went to my training officer. I said, I really want to create this. And she's like, well, why don't you present at APCO? I'm like, what? Wait. I'm like this very clear introvert, and you want me to present somewhere? It's like, no way. So we did. And so I did a test run with the supervisors in the radio room. And they're like, oh, well, this is great, but here we go again. It's just part of the job. And I was like, that's the mentality that I'm fighting, is that old mindset that it's just part of the job. So I was like, okay, fine. Well, I went to present anyway at my first APCO, and got such a great reception from it. People were coming up and saying, I didn't even know what that was, but I think I have it. Or just all these great comments. And then that's where it took off from there. Then I became a crisis intervention instructor and helping the police officers teach about mental health. I was like, okay. And then I was like, oh, I'm tired. I can't do this night shift anymore. Something has to change. And so I decided to go back to school and take the mental health route. And I tried very hard to get away from dispatch. I really did. I was so, I guess, just emotionally and physically exhausted by doing the last 5 years on nights that I wanted to get away. But then I find myself still coming back to it every turn that I take, because my clinical focus is on trauma. And what I found with clinicians is they may advertise as working with public safety. And I'm like, well, you work with dispatchers too, right? And they're like, who? What? Dispatchers. Do you not include them in your advertising? It's like, there's this or this company that wants to start a new outpatient program for first responders. And I was talking to the director. I said, "You're advertising for dispatchers too, right?" And she says, "No, we hadn't included them." I'm like, "They are part of the public safety family. They are the first responder. Who do you think sends the officers and paramedics to the citizen? Nobody can get any help without going through a dispatcher.
Mhm.
They're the ones who hear everything. And by the time the officers get there, the citizen is really calm.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
like we just had him for 10 minutes on the phone and
Yeah.
they're
That's
screaming and
us.
cussing
That's
us out,
you.
right?
That's yeah.
So that's another thing that I'm working on within the area that I can, is that advocacy with mental health and including dispatchers. So, and then, okay. So then that led me to my PhD. Where I am now in my last semester is I'm working on the research because I found, so I'm creating this PowerPoint for APCO and I'm trying to like Google articles. And I was like, wait, 911's been around for 50 years, but the first peer-reviewed published article wasn't even done until 2012. I'm like, what? But yet you can find hundreds of articles on police, fire, and EMS. So something is really missing here. So that
Yeah.
is where I'm coming back again, is I want to do the research on dispatchers and mental health, because research can help with advocacy and awareness. And in my state that I'm at, we still don't have dispatchers classified as public safety, which is really distressing.
Ugh. Okay, so it almost sounds like
What is
okay,
that?
so the 18 years, right? But
Yeah.
very quickly towards the end, you're learning a lot
Mm-hmm.
and you're applying a lot of things as well, building, creating stuff that really wasn't there, that was taboo to talk about, right? And
Right.
then 2012, it's interesting that you do this in 2012 because so in 2010, I'm in college and everything that I do now was started from a college project that I did on sharing dispatch stories, and it continued to build. And
Mm-hmm.
2012 was when I started doing the beginning of the podcast. 2013 is when it went like full on what I was doing. But it's like you and I, and there were others around that time, even though we didn't know each other, knew that each
Right.
other was doing things. It was like the universe was like coming together. It's like these people are going to start talking about this stuff and it's really going to get out there. So believe it or not, 2012. So I knew about APCO and I knew
Mhm.
about Nina. I knew about these organizations. However, I didn't know that either one had a mothership. I didn't know there was a national for either one of these. I thought I was under the impression at the time, because there wasn't a lot of information out there either, I guess,
Yeah.
um, that I thought all of the states just had their own chapters and they had these, state conferences and everything.
Mhm.
But it wasn't until 2013 that I ended up finding out, or early 2013, that there was a national for both. So you end up putting this stuff together, right?
Mhm.
And things are starting to come out, and people are talking to you, saying, "Didn't know about this stuff. I want to know more." And it seems like it pushed you as well in a way. What was that decision like, though, to leave dispatch and do what you're doing, but also to continue doing it for um, the first responders under the headset?
That to leave was difficult.
Mhm.
I loved it. I really did. When I got into it, I just knew that that was the place for me. I loved the team that I was working on, even though with all the bickering, everybody,
Right.
yeah, everybody was great. It was just that we all came together when it was needed, and we
Yes.
were there to help each other. So it was really hard. And it was scary too, Definitely. I'm like, I'm doing something new and I'm how old? So age was a factor too. But it is. Change is not always easy. But
Yeah.
I knew it was something that I had to do for me in the beginning to save my own sanity at the time. And then I just, I had a clinical supervisor tell me that, oh, you sound like a dispatcher. And this was a couple of years after I had already left. And I'm like, you know what? That's the best compliment anybody has ever given me. It really is. And that's when it kind of clicked with me is I may have left, but I can never truly separate myself from dispatch
Yeah.
because it's ingrained in who I am. So how can I take that, turn it around, and sort of give back to what dispatch has given me all those years? What can I do within my power of control to help?
And it was this,
And it
all of
was that.
this.
I know.
Yeah. It's amazing. And you continue doing it since then. So let's let's get into a little bit more of this because so we already went over, the session that you put out there and
Mhm.
what that was like. And I mean, so how about this first before we get
Sure.
further into this? What more did you learn from that? Because obviously there was a part that you learned that just people didn't know this. They didn't have this information. Like people weren't told, but also no one's really talking about it. So you do the session, people are coming up to you. What more did you learn?
About compassion fatigue or mental health in general, or
Well, the folks that were coming up to you, I guess, like what was that like to, to do that session and to learn more? The fact that there were people that were coming up just saying, "I didn't know about this. Like we need to talk about this stuff more."
for me, it was knowing that I was not alone in
Yeah.
this, that there were other people that were experiencing this too.
Mhm.
And why don't we talk about it? Because there is that stereotype and that stigma that if we do talk about it, somehow we are unfit for our job, which is, I don't understand that either because therapists even have therapists.
There you go. Yeah. And
Therapy should be normalized in our profession.
for sure. And I think a lot of it too is, the job, our calling, like it's so important to us that we
Mhm.
don't and because of just the severity of the types of calls that we're taking, the decisions that we make, like all of it is so high priority, high stress, all of it. Yeah, people don't want anybody to think, "Ah, can you not hack this?" Or to even hear, a supervisor or a deputy director, anybody ask the same question or wonder, or maybe they're not even thinking it at all. We get in our heads because we're our own worst critic, right? So
Yes.
immediately you start thinking, oh geez, someone is going to think I can't do this. Someone is going to think this, think this, think this. And then that starts adding even more stress to you where, even just feeling it in your shoulders. Oh, I'm flashbacking to, to some of the times I was in dispatch too, where I would be, like, oh man, what if this is this or that or that, just really getting in my head, after a call or something, and then realizing that my shoulders are up and then just bringing them down.
Mhm.
Even right now, just that moment, I had goosebumps
I
because
know
it
you feel it.
releases.
It's like your shoulders come up to your ears and you're clenching your teeth and you're not sure
Yes.
why you leave and you've got this massive headache because you've been clenching your teeth the whole time. But
Right.
therapy doesn't have to be always going when you have like this huge trauma.
Mhm.
Therapy can just be that impartial person just to talk to or just process something.
I like that.
Mhm.
So, what exactly is compassion fatigue?
So, compassion fatigue was actually created as a less stigmatizing term for like secondary traumatic stress. So, here we go again with that stigma, right?
It does sound nicer, yes.
Compassion fatigue. I'm
Right.
just tired.
Yeah.
But it's that emotional and physical exhaustion that we experience from the exposure to the trauma of others. We listen to the phone calls every day, all the time, and we hear the worst of human nature sometimes. And that is what we hear is not normal. So we experience physical and emotional reactions, which is completely normal to an abnormal event.
Right. I mean, imagine speaking to someone that is close to you and over the phone, right? And you
Mhm.
get into this like hardcore argument. And during that argument, of course, you're angry and there's all of this stuff that's going back and forth. Or if you're just listening to someone just rail on you for whatever it is that's going
Right.
on. But now imagine that it's the same, but it's not someone that you're close to. It's a stranger that is going through their nightmare. And it is your duty to keep them calm, get
Mhm.
enough information, and depending on the call that it is, whether it be domestic or whatever, keeping people separated too at the same time.
Right.
So I put it that way because you think about taking a phone or having a phone call with someone who's close to you and you're having this argument and it can be gut wrenching, right? Depending on what it is that you're talking about. And you think, man, that was probably one of the most difficult calls I've had to take with whoever it is. But then when you think about 911, that's like 100 times more hardcore because you don't know that person. Their life is in your hands, right? With your
Right.
decisions that you're taking. But then also kind of on the same side, if it's somebody that you know, ooh, even higher.
That is true. And that has happened. Dispatchers have gotten calls from family members or
Yeah,
friends while they were working. And that definitely, or officers that that are line of duty deaths. You're either on the phone or working the radio when that happens. And then when we're taking the phone call, we have this sense of control or
hmm,
responsibility. Especially if the outcome is not good, then we sort of take that on ourselves, which when we know that we have done everything that we possibly could and we followed our training to the letter and the call still doesn't come out right, we still feel responsible.
for sure. Yeah. My last about 2 weeks in dispatch, those last couple of weeks of my career, it felt as though the dispatch gods or the dispatch universe, whatever you want to call it, was hitting me with every shit call that you could think of. It was crazy. It was like I was in a gang and I
Yeah.
was getting beat out. Is what it felt like. And there was a specific call that started out as a disorderly. The person left before the call came into me, and at the very end of the call, the caller ends up telling me, "I think he's suicidal as well." And I thought, "Why didn't you lead with that?"
Right.
That changes the priority completely. And I get the phone number for the person, hang up with the person I was talking to. All of this information is already going out and telling, the radio, the person on main radios already knows that this is a higher priority complaint now. I'm trying to call that person, and as I'm trying to call that person, there's a call coming in and nobody can answer. There's four of us there. It's during shift change. It is so busy that nobody else can get the phone. So I hang up from trying to call the person I was trying to call to see if I can get a hold of them, right? And
Mhm.
the phone call that I end up taking is a person saying, "You need to get somebody out here. I just saw a car go into a tree."
Ooh.
I had the vehicle information. I asked the caller what the car was, and as he told me what type of car it was, I I remember mouthing it, like I lipped it as he said it, and I thought that's the person I was trying to call, and it turned out it was the person. They didn't make it, but after that, I had about 30 minutes where I told, because I was a supervisor on that night, and we talk about taking on that responsibility, right?
Mhm.
I took 30 minutes mapping out the distance from the house to where the person had gone into the tree, was thinking about my questioning. Like, that's how deep I got into it because
Oh,
I was taking responsibility for it, because I was thinking, if I could have, what if I would have changed my questioning? Could I have called that person and prevented this? It wasn't until I figured everything out and also spoke to one of the officers that I realized that person had already gone into the tree before
mhm.
I had a chance. There was nothing I could have done, nothing I
Right.
could have done, and that was the only thing that helped me feel better. But before that, I can't even explain the horror inside of trying to figure all of that out, almost
Mhm.
whiteboarding it to
Yeah.
to that point, because I was taking on that responsibility.
Yeah. And that is a lot for one person to take on too. It is. We struggle with that
Mhm.
too. Um, and especially there are times when we get the closure and there's times when we don't get the closure. And then I don't know which one is worse, when we do
Right.
or when we don't and we're left to wonder constantly, and we take it home. I don't know what happened to this caller. So when we come in the next day, I'm looking through the calls to see if there was another call at that same address to see or to put in like the clearing codes. What did the officer find when they went out there?
Right.
So, yeah.
It's well, so continuing with compassion fatigue, what are
Mhm.
some of those symptoms? Because I know damn well, even though I didn't know what it was at the time, I know that I went through a lot of that, like everyone else, like you
Yeah.
and others who are in this profession as well. What are some of those symptoms?
So there is very little difference between the symptoms of PTSD and compassion fatigue. What
Mhm.
makes it different is the route of traumatization. So with compassion fatigue, it is the trauma is not happening to us or to our family. It is happening to someone else, but we're hearing it. So we have a tendency to re-experiencing their trauma or their call. It's like we're constantly playing the call back in our head. Like you said, is there something else I could have done?
Mhm.
We have dreams. We suddenly re-experience it out of nowhere. You just get this automatic panic or sweat break out, like you're in Walmart, and you just break out in a sweat and you just start thinking about the call. And distress over reminders. It could be, well, last month at the same day, I took this call. Or you get a call and it sounds similar to the one that you took, and you break out in this like automatic panic. You have numbing of the reminders. You avoid it. Okay, I don't want to pick up the 911 call. I'm going to sit here and let somebody else pick it up. Like me, I became a supervisor intentionally so I wouldn't have to answer the phone call. Efforts to avoid things. We have like diminished interest in activities, things that we used to like to do. We become isolated. Self care goes out the window. We have difficulty sleeping, which, shift work, we all have difficulty sleeping anyway, but it
I
may
still
become.
do.
Me too.
Yeah.
Wait, what? It's 3 o'clock? No, I don't need to get up at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
Um, we get irritable or angry. We have difficulty concentrating, or we have this feeling of like helplessness and hopelessness. And the startle response, reactivity to triggers. So I don't know who had the bright idea in my radio room, but they made our phone, the tone, a siren. So we heard sirens every time the 911 line would ring. And it would be in our ear in our headset, and it would also be audible on the overhead.
Oh my.
Are you doing this intentionally just just to mess with us?
Right. I oh my lord. I feel like that would heighten it even more, because you talk about triggers, right? You talk about, a lot of these different things, and if you hear, if let's just say you're walking, or you're at a festival. Let's say you're at a festival or something, just enjoying a time, or like um the market or whatever. Um and you're walking around and you hear that siren, and you end up like twitching or something, right?
Yeah.
And so I've got a good example of that as well. Is there was a phone call I remember taking once where there was a girl who was hiding in her basement because her a guy that she had been dating, she dumped him, but he was not having it.
Mm.
And he was kind of stalking her a little bit, and he would come to the house, and she would see him pass by. But this one time, he had parked down the road and walked over to the house, and she kind of lived in a wooden area, and she saw him, and he's like he's knocking, and was just kind of jiggling the doorknob, and she ran and she hid in the basement, and I'm talking to her, and it's giving me goosebumps right now.
Mhm.
But I remember the doorbell, because he hit the doorbell, and it was very loud. And that's a sound that I will never forget. And I don't remember where I was, but I heard it, and I froze. And whoever I was with, again, I don't remember, but whoever I was with at the time, they're like, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I just had a trigger moment like that." And that's what it was. Like, whatever the tone I was at, I might have actually been at a Menards or a Lowe's or something close to
Mhm.
where they have displays of different doorbells and stuff, and people were messing with them, and I heard one that sounded almost exactly like the one on that call, and I
Yeah.
had that moment where I went back. I was like, "Holy shit, that was creepy."
Yeah, and they stick with us. I mean, even after
Mhm.
all this time, I do have one that stays with me, and I'm not quite sure. It was an individual that had been shot numerous times in his chest, and he comes into the house and he calls, and I'm trying to get him to say, who did it, because I know it's not being good, asking him, or the outcome may not be really great. So I want to at least, what we had called at the time, I don't know if it's still done, but that dying declaration
Mhm.
of who did this. And then before he could say anything, I hear the phone hit the floor. And then that was it. So to me, it's that phone hitting the floor is what I hear sometimes when it'll just pop in my head. And then that's what sticks with me. It's not
Wow.
so much the conversation, it's the noise of the phone.
Right. So that, and I'm not like you. I for those listening and watching, I am not licensed in anything. I'm only speaking from my experience and stuff that I've been told, especially from my own doctor. So um situational anxiety, I didn't even know that was anything.
Yeah.
I had a time where I was this is when I'm now working in the private sector of 901 as an industry partner, and there was so much stuff that I was going through this specific day. I walked over to the other side of the building to speak to a friend of mine who we were developing some stuff for Texas 911 training, and I'm standing like there's a barrier in this like cube farm, and I'm standing with my arms just resting on the top of where the cubes are, and everything started spinning, and I almost passed out. I had enough sense to sit down in the chair that was next to me, and he's like, "Are you all right, man?" And I said, "I don't know what just happened." That freaked me out. So ever since then, and it hasn't happened in a long time,
Mhm.
because I finally figured things out, and was dealing with it and stuff. But a little bit after that, when I would stand in line at the grocery store, and there was a barrier that was close to the height of when that happened, I would start feeling that dizzy feeling again. And I had asked the doctor about it, and he goes, "You're having situational anxiety. Like you're remembering when that happened. So things that are similar to it, that's why it's impacting you like that. You need to we need to figure that out." And through a lot of yoga, meditation,
Mhm.
and a bunch of other stuff, I was able to figure it out.
Yeah.
But I wonder if some of that, some of those triggers are kind of in that same wheelhouse of situational anxiety. And that's why I say I'm not a doctor, I'm not anything. I'm just going off of what the doctor has told me, and my doctor has told me, and maybe you can kind of, elaborate on that a little bit.
Definitely. As with anything, if you experience any physical or emotional symptoms, seek professional help
Right.
first. Don't try to self-diagnose or Google it.
Mhm.
Um, go see
Which
your doctor.
sometimes that makes it worse, right? Because then you
Yeah.
find out my leg is gonna fall off, or, it gets worse. And also, if you start EMDing yourself, which is emergency medical dispatch, if you go through those protocols on yourself, it's basically WebMD for dispatchers.
Yes.
You're kind of making it worse, so don't freak yourself out.
Right. I know. It's like I'm going to grow a third eyeball here. Oh my God.
Yes.
But no, definitely seek professional help if you're experiencing symptoms of any kind. But some of the physical symptoms are dizziness,
Mhm.
headaches. Uh, our immune system gets compromised when we're stressed, and we develop frequent colds and flu. And we also have that anxiety, guilt, depression, sadness. And then with that, we have negative coping skills that how do you get to sleep at night? Hey, I'll go home and drink some wine so I can get to sleep.
Right. Yeah.
Also, it is a rapid heartbeat. The same with the panic attacks, is that instant sweat or the dizziness and feeling the tunnel vision where you feel like things are closing in on you.
Right.
Yeah, all that is part of anxiety too. But
It's crazy how much stress can impact you, and a lot of
mhm,
times you don't think about it.
mm-mm.
Because again, we're empaths. We're also,
Yes,
we're givers and caregivers rather, and we're always helping others because that's our job, right? But I think a lot of us are like that anyway. In general, I feel like we're like that already. But also, we don't pay attention to ourselves. We don't
no,
listen to our bodies.
nope.
And I've told people a lot that if you don't listen to your body, eventually your body is going to make you listen. And I say that from experience because that shit has happened to me where I'm like, no, I'll be all right. I'll put this off. And what I'm saying putting off is like either, going to get, and it's little things like going to get a massage, going to the chiropractor, or just like meditation or doing yoga, like or going for a walk, little things that seem so simple, but it's stuff that your body needs, right?
Yes,
It's like when you have not had water in a long time and you go to drink water and you can feel your body absorbing it, like, hey, stupid, give me more. Like I need more of that, right? But we don't always pay attention to that
yeah,
because sometimes we feel like there's time. There's time. And sometimes you're at the end of that time. And what I mean by at the end of that time is where your body is now going to make you listen. And you're either going to get sick or, your body's just going to be aching or whatever. Or, like in my case, end up in the emergency room because I hadn't been taking care of myself and my body made me listen. And thank you, body, because that bill was expensive.
yes, yes, it was. I know we don't because we're so used to helping everybody else that we don't take care of ourselves, or we don't think that we have the time to take care of ourselves. But it's we don't have we have to. I mean, there's a reason on the airplane they tell you to put the oxygen mask on yourself first,
Right.
because if you both pass out, hey, you're not doing anybody any good.
Nope.
Or we're busy, we have shift work. That is hard on our bodies. Night shift is hard. No matter how much we tell ourselves we love night shift, it is still hard.
Yes, and I
Yeah.
loved it, but it was horrible sometimes. I okay, I'll tell you this really quick, and then I want to get into some of the differences between CF and PTSD.
Okay.
I was recently at my old dispatch center, and I was there for about 3.5 hours or so, just visiting and hanging out. And there were some newer folks that were there that I had just met, and my um, I worked with her, right, in dispatch, but we actually grew up together. And I've known her for years, since we were kids. We went to school together. She graduated a year before me. She's now the training coordinator there at the old center that I worked at. And we were talking about some memories and stuff with the newer folks, and we're joking and laughing. And I said, "Let me tell you, I loved midnights. However, there were times where I would feel myself getting tired and I could not consume another cup of coffee because I was
Yeah.
feeling like crap, and end up getting that crash when you have too much. So if I was getting tired, what I would do is I would go to the bathroom that's within the dispatch center, and I would just simply rest my head against the wall and close my eyes for just like a minute,
Hmm.
and then wash my face and then come back out and continue working. But that's something that I would do. Like, that was something that I needed to do
Yeah.
to get through those nights, because yeah, you're right. It is hard. It is fun. There's a lot of different types of calls that come in at
Oh, yeah.
midnight, but it is hard on the body.
It is. And self care, it doesn't always have to be something big or expensive.
Hmm.
It can be that moment that I'm taking a minute just to step away for a second. Or even now, with I'm still in school, it's a cup of coffee. I'll take 5 minutes to have a cup of coffee and just to sit here, put all my work away, just to sit for a few minutes. Just a way to center yourself and to get your mind off of all that chaos is going on and to breathe.
Exactly. That is, if I could go back in time and talk to myself, and I think I've told you this before because we kind of had this discussion
Mhm.
the last time, but that's one of the things that I would tell myself early on. Like, you're gonna learn a lot. You're gonna go through a lot, but hang in there. You've got this. But also, get into yoga sooner, get into meditation sooner, get into these breathing techniques, because towards the end of my career, when I was really deep into practice, and I'm still practicing now, but I mean, while in dispatch,
Mhm.
a lot of those phone calls that I was taking, I was getting good enough with it that I could control my breathing and keep myself calm in
Yeah.
order to keep the person calm as well. And I was able to get more information. It was a lot easier to do certain things. And after the call, even if it was a hard one, of course it would impact me, but it wouldn't impact me as much because I'm figuring out how to keep myself calm through some of those
Mhm.
breathing techniques. So that would be something I would go back and tell myself if I could.
Yeah. Breathing techniques are actually very helpful for anxiety and
Mhm.
numerous things because what it does is when we breathe, so when we're stressed, we start taking short, shallow breaths from up here instead of the deeper breaths from like our diaphragm. So when we're taking short breaths, our brain is going into that fight or flight mode
Mhm.
because like we don't have enough oxygen. We need to like do things. So when we breathe, it is telling our body and our brain that we are okay and to stop that fight or flight. So we're able to think again and to do what we need to do instead of that 911 call. Ah!
Right, yes. Yes, exactly. So, there you were mentioning how there are, excuse me, a lot of, symptoms that are very similar between
Very
both
simple.
compassion fatigue and PTSD, but what are those differences? What are the differences between the 2?
So the main difference is the route of traumatization.
Mhm.
So with PTSD, it is trauma that is happening to you or to someone that you know, whether it's you've learned about it, it happened directly. That is the main difference, is how the trauma occurs. Another difference is the length of time. For PTSD, symptoms are usually consistent over 30 days, and they stay pretty much consistent day after day. And it can be also like with compassion fatigue, you may have some days that you're fine, or you may have some days where I'm playing my tape back over and over again just to make sure I didn't transpose an address. And you're feeling like the irritability and the anxiety. And then other days you're fine. So it's the route of traumatization, the length of time, and the severity of the symptoms. PTSD, sometimes with the flashbacks, it is like you are back into that trauma. With compassion fatigue, you're there, you're experiencing it, but you can still somewhat function. Those are the main differences. It's still distressing, but you can go about your day-to-day activities.
Makes a lot of sense. And I love that we're having this conversation because and we kind of talked about this too before we went on air here, that I think that there are a lot of folks that sometimes look at one more than the other, or maybe they don't know those differences. So that's why conversations like this are so important. But what are some of those challenges, that the daily cumulative stress, those impacts, which we kind of talked about a little bit already, from both of us, but from what you have found, what are some of those challenges, that daily stress and those impacts just from all of this?
Besides the anxiety, the
Hmm.
increased depression, the irritability, it's just not wanting to answer the phone anymore or to be around anybody. And it's not having that capacity to feel that compassion or empathy for anybody anymore. It's like we get into this because we do care about individuals. We do want to help others. And like you said, most of us have that empathic ability. But after a while with compassion fatigue, you just don't. You don't want to. You just become exhausted and don't want to pick up the phone anymore.
I remember working with a few people who I remember showing up for a shift once, and there was someone who was on a domestic call, and they had been on it for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And I walked in, and I remember saying, I'm here, I'm just waiting. And I remember the person that was there put the caller on hold, gave me the lowdown on what was going on, and was like, "All right, have a good one." And I was like, "I'm sorry, what?" And they said, I'm heading out. My shift is up." And I was like, your call isn't over. Like I can't jump into your call.
Right.
And it's not that I've never taken over a call before, but as long as this call was going on, the person that they were speaking to me, I feel like once you build that connection, that rapport with the caller, if you switch on them while they're going through a traumatic event, living through their nightmare, they might have what is it on EMD, that refreak, right? You
Yes.
might there might be, a completely different thing that happens because now they're speaking to someone that they don't have that connection with, that they
Sure.
don't have the rapport with. And also, when you're talking about Q&A stuff, like that completely changes the whole thing. So I remember telling the person, like, you got to finish this call. I said, "Do you really need me to take it over?" And they said, "No, no, no. I can finish it." And then they did. And then afterwards, I was like, "Is everything okay?" They were like, "It's just been a really hard day, and I
Mm-hmm.
was ready to go." I said, "Oh, I understand that completely. I wasn't trying to be a jerk. I was thinking about the caller as well, and how that call might go south if I jump on there and they don't know who I am."
Right.
But there have been other times where it's been a different type of call or something, and I've taken the call over and said, "Hi, my name's Ricardo. My partner got busy on another call, and I'm taking it over," and it was fine. But this one was a domestic call that they had been on for like 25-30 minutes. It's like,
Oh
no,
no.
you're gonna have to finish this one because I can't just jump in.
Right. Right. Yeah. No, I wouldn't have taken that one either. Not
Yeah, there's that. I say that story because you mention how there are times with like some of the daily stress or the impacts or
Mhm.
these symptoms where there are folks who they're going through so much that sometimes these calls, you're taking them and you
Yeah.
want to be done with the call.
Yeah, you
You want
do.
to head out. Yeah.
Yeah, and most of the time we don't even have a moment to get up afterwards. If we do have a traumatic call, we have to pick up the next ringing phone.
Hmm.
That's what happens, because a lot of our radio rooms are short staffed. We don't have enough people, or we don't have that support after a traumatic call.
Very much so. Yes.
Yeah, we don't. So we just do the emotion code coping and shove it in our brain and compartmentalize it and keep on going. And then we forget to deal with it later and take care of ourselves.
Right. Or you have one of those moments where you're dealing with one of these high priority calls, and when you're done, you're thinking, oh man, that was nuts. It's got to be like halfway through the shift now, and it's been like 5 minutes. You're like, damn. Like, oh, I thought I had gone further than that. Nope, you've got way more to go.
Yep.
So we talked about all these impacts. We talked about the stress. We've talked about the differences between CF and PTSD, all of these different things. But now let's look at the other side, the coming out of it. Well, not, I don't mean coming out of it as being done with it, because compassion fatigue, like a lot of this stuff, it still kind of stays with you, right? You continue to get work or help rather, and you learn how to manage it, and you're able to continue. You're now able to talk about it more and everything. So that's the part that I'm talking about. This
Mhm.
transition now, resiliency,
Yes.
and in the increased well-being. How do we get to that point, and how important do you feel that it is to speak to someone that even has public safety experience, or someone like you who comes from the chair, who comes from the headset? And the reason I ask this is because a group of coworkers and we had a situation that we went through,
Mhm.
and this is nothing against this person. I'm sure this person was an amazing counselor. They do very well in what they do. However, when we walk in, he was kind of cold. Like, you can feel a vibe, right? You can feel it from a person. Us as humans, we have that connection where you can just tell. and
Yeah.
and this person just dead eyes look, and just kind of cold. But I almost feel, in a way, now thinking about it, that the person had more of was just trying to have kind of that more of a professional and like tough exterior.
Yeah.
But because of what we had gone through, we walk in and feel that, and it's like, oh no, what's going to happen? And he introduces himself and says, what is it that happened? And of course, I end up being the elected spokesperson to say what it was that we went through. And immediately after that, the person says, well, how does that make you guys feel? And
Ah,
we're like, damn. I'm like, we tried to start explaining, and he's just kind of asked the same thing, but a different way.
yes.
And I said, I apologize. I don't know that this is going to work. And he actually agreed too. And I said, we're going to try to find somebody else, or maybe speak to somebody who comes from public safety. And the person the person wasn't a jerk about it or anything. The person agreed, and I was like, oh, okay, well, this ended up being better than I thought. They were fine with us wanting to switch. So I say that story to, again, to talk about this, or ask this question, to see what you think about how important do you think it is to speak with someone who does have that experience.
Okay, so all right. So first, not everybody in dispatch is going to experience compassion fatigue or
Right. Yeah.
PTSD. But if you do experience symptoms and you think that is getting to the point where it is impacting you negatively, definitely seek help from either a medical professional or mental health. So, the way that we can build resiliency is boundaries. Start creating boundaries with yourself to have that physical and emotional self care. Get trusted social support. Somebody you trust, somebody you can talk to, whether it's a professional, friend, family, just talk about it. we don't have to keep it bottled up inside to ourselves. So when seeking mental health, for me, it is important to have somebody that understands public safety, the background. If not, at least the clinician understand trauma, because not every clinician is trained in trauma, which is important in what we do. It was important for me anyway, for a therapist to understand. Um, so if you go to a mental health counselor, I would ask, are you trained in trauma? Do you have experience with public safety? Now, finding somebody experienced in public safety might be a little bit longer, like reach, because not all of us are. But if you can, that would be fantastic. But if not, just ask them if they specialize in trauma. And if you go to a clinician like y'all did and it's not that fit, then it's okay to say, this is not working for me, or I don't feel like that connection is there. So if I had a client come up to me and say that, and I would completely understand, because I know as a therapist that there has to be this connection here, because my client is sitting in front of me and telling me all of their deepest secrets. And I want them to feel comfortable. I want them to feel as though they can trust me. And I want them to feel that I would be able to help them. Not, I'm just wasting my hour just to go sit in the office and you're just asking me how I feel.
Right. And I'm so glad that you said everything that you just said, especially, kind of going along with my story as well, but also looking back at your session for Dare to Be Great 4, which for those who are watching and listening, if you've not had a chance, make sure to go and check out Angela's session. It was excellent. There was so much great engagement and everything. One of the comments that had come up, and this is kind of what we were touching on right now, there was a comment that was put out there that says, counselors trained in trauma is key, just kind of, how you were saying as well. And the comment goes along to say, it's okay to interview your counselor and fire if necessary. and I'm glad that we're talking about this and some of the stuff that you said as well, because as I had said in the beginning, before we went on air to record this episode, is that I feel like maybe sometimes when people have mentioned going to therapy or, trying it out or whichever, and it didn't work, I think it's because maybe they had that fear of telling this professional that they've gone to go speak to, you're not the right fit for me. Whether they feel bad or, again, that fear or whatever, it's almost like they need permission or hearing folks like you or others to say, it's okay to say that we're not a good fit, to be able to find someone else. Because, I mean, and this is, I guess, an odd way to put it as well, but I'll just give an example from my history. I had a medication that I was taking for high blood pressure, and I was having like this weird cough from it, like a dry cough. And I went through that for almost a year. And I finally went back to my doctor and I told her that this was going on. And I said, sometimes I have to cough almost violently so that the little scratchiness that I feel in my throat will go away. And she goes, Mr. Martinez, why didn't you tell me this before? And in my head, I'm thinking right away, I had a fear of telling you that this wasn't working for me.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to say it, also because I needed it for my blood pressure, right?
Right.
And I kind of told her that, and she goes, that's an allergic reaction. That's a symptom. That's a side effect. You needed to tell me that. And she gave me something else, and it worked for me. So a weird way to compare this, it's almost like, kind of like a medication that doesn't work for you, but if you're afraid not to say something, you're going to be stuck with that until you speak up. So in the same sense, when you're seeking a therapist, counselor, whichever, if that person doesn't work for you, please say it so that you can find someone that does work for you and you can actually get the help you need without having to go through any secondary issues again, like I was with that medication. Oh, learn the hard way. Damn.
Right. Right. So, well, so is you if you have a therapist and your therapist is challenging you to do the work and you don't want to, and then you want to be like, oh no, you're making me do work.
Yeah,
Then
that's different.
that's
Yeah.
different, right?
Right.
That's
Yes.
what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to
Right.
challenge you to get you to do work. But
Yes.
no, if you're just feeling like there's that connection is not there, it's like definitely, see first, verbalize that with your therapist. It's
Yeah.
okay. Have that conversation. I just don't feel like this is working. And then see if you can find somebody else.
Perfect. That's exactly the type of stuff that, that needs to be done. And so as we go into the wrap up of this episode, which has been awesome to have you on and really kind of dig deep into compassion fatigue, the differences between compassion fatigue and also PTSD, some of those impacts, the symptoms, and building resiliency and coming out on the other end, right?
Yeah.
What is some advice that you have for those who are dealing with this or maybe are kind of on the fence of seeking out help? What are some of those thoughts, some of that advice for those who are really thinking about it and maybe are still kind of afraid of that, that stigma? Because in some centers, everyone is talking about it, right? But there are still some that are out there where that stigma is real, where that
It
fear is alive.
it
And though that's
definitely
where we
is.
need to, right, we need to get to that part. What are your thoughts?
It's just making yourself a priority. And in dispatch, it's like we pour so much of ourselves into that. It's like, don't forget about yourself in this process. And it's okay to go talk to a therapist. It doesn't mean that you can't do your job. It's just you want somebody to go talk to. You could sit there and talk about the weather all day if that's what you wanted to, and if that's what your therapist wanted to. But it's just therapy.
Mhm.
It's just that impartial person that you can talk to and share things with.
Awesome.
And to take that first step, just it's the important thing is just to talk to somebody and to take care of you.
I think that's probably one of the hardest parts, right? Is that first step
Yes.
because there's so much uncertainty. But I would rather, for myself personally, I would rather take that first step than wait years and wonder, what if I would have done it this way? I
I
feel
know.
like I feel like that regret or that type of stress or whatever later on will be worse than taking that first step.
Would I
I
still be
mean,
in dispatch if I would have saw a therapist back in 2010? Or when this happened, would I still be there?
yeah. And I think even if you are that person who waits, whatever, and you're thinking, what if I would have done this before? Even if it's years from now and you're doing it,
Yeah,
please, still
yeah,
do it because
let's do
it's
it.
really, really important. This was awesome. I loved having you on again and
Thank
talking
you.
more about this. And again, this is a very important discussion and information that people need to really take in and get out there. How can people find out more about you and what it is that you do?
So right now, you have my email, right? You have it. So
Yes.
if you want to post it, that's fine. I am getting ready to do a research project on dispatchers and compassion fatigue. So if anybody has that experience, I would love to talk to you. It is anonymous, no name, no agency, no anything. It's just a quick interview, a couple of questions. But that's what I'm doing now is working on the research. And I'm still doing conferences.
Hmm.
I love APCO. I really do. So I put in for all of them if I can go. So
Awesome.
that's what I'm doing.
That'll be great. Thank you again so much for being on, for the job that you do and helping all of those of the thin gold line, those are within the trenches of 911. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much.
So I will be right back here with you in just one moment. And for those who are watching and listening, if you have any comments, questions, or you want to be a guest on the show, you can email us, and that's going to be wttpodcast@gmail.com. Once again, that is wttpodcast@gmail.com. And you can follow us on Twitter. That is @91podcast. You can like us on Facebook. That is facebook.com/Within the Trenches podcast. This episode has been sponsored by In Digital, a leader in next-gen core services. And if you want to be a subscriber of the podcast, whether it be on Facebook or be a patron, you can check us out and help support us. It's facebook.com/Within the Trenches podcast/support. And once you put that in, there'll be a video. It'll show you all the information on the right, everything that you get for being a subscriber. And it's a light version, I would say, of patreon.com/WTT podcast. You can help support us there as well and become a patron of the podcast. There's all kinds of discounts to the store, swag. So there's like t-shirts, stickers, sweatshirts, hats, all types of things that you can get as a patron of the podcast. So there's 7 different tiers. So make sure to check that out. Once again, that is patreon.com/WTT podcast. This can be seen on Facebook, YouTube, as well as Twitter and LinkedIn. And you can listen for the audio 24/7 on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, your favorite podcasting app, and withinthetrenches.net. Have a good one, everyone, and we'll see you in the next one.